A very good evening to everyone. It's delightful to see the hall so full. We have the great
And already people waiting in line to ask questions.
Absolutely.
Brilliant.
I'm just trying to figure out where the mics are, and there are already people at them. Wonderful. I understand that this is the first dialogue session that our Prime Minister is having since taking on the role of Prime Minister. So it's a great honor for all of us and you to be able to engage in this dialogue. I was actually going to begin with a little bit of a preamble and then take the privilege of being moderator to ask the first question so that you have time to think of your questions. But obviously, you've all thought of your questions already. And nevertheless, I'm going to take the privilege of being the moderator to ask the first question, and then I will come to many of you across the room. Now, Prime Minister's painted for us a picture of a world where we are caught in major global sweeping forces, whether it's technological disruption, whether it's climate change, whether it's geopolitical tension. But amidst all of that, he has painted an optimistic picture of what Singapore can still achieve and build a world, a life that is better than we've ever had even before this. I suppose the question that I would like to pose to the Prime Minister is, you talked about the refreshed Singapore dream in your maiden speech as Prime Minister. And I want to focus on a particular dimension of that, which I know many of the young people in this room would be interested in. And that is the question of what the economy for Singapore looks like in the days, months, and years ahead. What are the opportunities? What are the growth areas? What should young people invest themselves in? What sorts of skills should they be developing in order to position themselves for that future?
Thanks. I'll try to be short so that we can get through all the questions. I can understand the desire to try and anticipate what new growth industries are going to emerge in the coming years. I mean, people will ask, in the past, in the 90s, we had finance, then after that we had pharmaceuticals, biotech was big, and now IT is big. So what's next? What's the next big thing? I think it's very hard to predict these things, and I would think there's no point angsting or worrying, trying to guess what the next big growth industry is. It's going to be very hard to anticipate because industry trends are moving so quickly. You will never know what new growth industries emerge. It's almost like guessing what's the next big stock in the stock market. It's very hard. So rather than worry too much about that, the second part of Prof. Lily's question, Prof. Kong's question was, what skills would you want to think about? And I think that's a more fruitful question and area to deliberate over. And there I would offer some suggestions. First, think about mega trends that will be with us over the coming years. Not industries, but big mega trends. What are they? So number one, I would say, would be digital technology and AI, what I have just mentioned. It will be a major trend that will be with us and will be a game changer for all of us, which means for young people like yourselves now, you should be familiar with technology. If you are already into technology, you are already into software, programming, good for you. Some of you may say, but I really can't stand programming. I don't like computer science at all. I don't like numbers, so what do I do? Well, don't despair, because even if that's not your cup of tea, you can embrace technology. You can learn, you can familiarize yourself with AI tools. You can start to learn how to use technology and AI tools better. And this will apply to you regardless of what job you want to be. I mean, you can be a lawyer, you can be in finance, you can be an accountant, an architect, you can be a designer. You will have to start using more and more technological tools, including AI tools. Take an extreme example. Even in the case of music, an area which I happen to be familiar with because it's a hobby of mine. You may not want to be a professional musician, but even if you wanted to, you have to learn technology. Because so much of music today is digital music, it's digitalized. You can do sampling, you can put tracks together and create a digital production, all in your own computer. And so if you want to be a really good musician, you can't just learn an instrument, you need to master technology. So across all fields, I mean, you don't have to be a programmer, but you have to start to familiarize yourself with technology and be able to use tools, technological tools, effectively. Think of AI as your co-worker, as your friend, as somebody, as AI is something that will enable you to be a better human being, and embrace that. So that's one area, one mega trend. Another mega trend would be in sustainability. It's going to happen. So again, you may not want to be in environmental science. You may not want to learn about climate change, and that's fine. But whatever area you are in, you have to have some basic knowledge about the climate. Because more and more, companies everywhere will have to start thinking about how to get to net zero, how to decarbonize. So they will need people who are familiar with this. Even in finance, for example, green finance is one of the fastest growing areas of finance. So don't think about industry silos anymore. Think about these big mega trends, which will be with us for the coming years and decades, and start to think about how you can understand these trends better and what new skills you will need to acquire. I will just offer a third one very quickly before we wrap up, which is the rise of Asia. The fact that the center of gravity of the global economy will shift more and more towards Asia. And the rise of Asia is not just about China and India. I mean, these are the two big countries in Asia, but it's also our region, Southeast Asia. So think about how you can understand the region better. Indonesia is a huge economy, more than $1 trillion, much bigger than Singapore. Vietnam, lots of opportunities. Think about how you can understand our neighborhood, Southeast Asia, better, because if you have that ability to understand Southeast Asia, your skill sets will be in demand. Employers will want to hire you and say, maybe you could do a posting in the region and you will be able to help us grow a franchise, grow operations in Southeast Asia. So if you think along those lines, big mega trends, and then position yourself to ride these trends, position yourself with the skills that are necessary to take advantage of these trends. I think that will put young people in a good position for the future.
Many thanks, Prime Minister. And I couldn't help but smile at and with my colleagues because digital transformation, sustainable living, and growth in Asia are the three priority areas we've identified in SMU.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. This was not planned.
Thank you. There's so many of you at the mics. What I'm going to do is to call on the first person to make it to each of the three mics, right? Starting with the young lady there, and then 2 and number 3. I'll take 3 questions at one go, and hopefully there's some coherence in the questions, and then we'll go from there.
Could I ask for your guidance on an issue that currently me and my friends are facing? To go fast, go alone. But to go far, go together. We have observed that Singapore is a good place to earn a wage, but it is expensive to retire here. Our parents, some of them unwilling, some of them unable, have chosen to move to more affordable countries to retire. I would like us to stay as one family, one community, one society. Could I have your guidance on this matter? Thank you.
So understand that the goal of having a 15K AI practitioner by 2030 in Singapore, while it's a great idea, it attracts investment to the country and knowing that we have this pool of talents. So my question is, from the perspective of society, what else can we do to ensure most of our people don't feel left behind? This is even after we push for reskilling and retraining. Thank you.
You spoke about many developments that affect our lives today, such as AI and the pandemic. My question is, in view of these developments, if you could go back in time to 2011 and give the newly elected Lawrence Wong a piece of advice, what would it be?
Always expect the unexpected. Like questions like this in a dialogue session. Okay, let me go through maybe this question first. We've talked about nurturing 15,000 AI practitioners. These are people who are really cutting edge AI. Not everyone in Singapore can do that. Those who have the aptitude with the inclinations, we want to nurture you. We want to help you get there. And if you have that talent, then go all out for it. Learn programming, learn what it means to be a good AI research scientist. And we have programs for that. And then, of course, we will complement that with professionals from abroad to form the best AI team here. And if we do that, I think it will give us the best chance to get companies to do more investments in Singapore. And when the leading companies of the world, be it Apple, Google, whatever you name it, right? Even the financial companies, when the biggest companies of the world see the AI talent that's here, they will want to invest more in Singapore. And when they do so, they create more jobs for all Singaporeans. So that's our strategy. But the question is, well, if you do that, how do we make sure that Singaporeans are not left behind? Well, the good thing is that the AI advancement is making AI a lot more accessible today. Everyone, I mean, AI is on WhatsApp now. And you don't need to know very much to use AI, no, it's not called ChatGPT, it's called something else. You don't need to know very much about AI to access AI. So with AI advancements making AI more accessible, we can ensure that more and more Singaporeans can benefit from AI. Of course, there will be risk which we have to guard against: deep fakes, impersonations, scams. These are all very real risks which we will have to guard against, and we will have to continue to educate people. But I think the first point is AI becoming more accessible will make the benefits of AI more broad-based. Second thing we can do is really through education. So equipping young students like yourselves on how to use AI tools. And I think all of you will say you already use ChatGPT. I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do it for your homework too. And that's fine. Because more and more, ChatGPT and AI will be like a calculator. Do we say you cannot use calculators? We don't. It's a tool. And AI will be a very powerful tool to facilitate you in becoming better. So the key to this is to embrace the tool, learn how to use the tool effectively. And it's not just about asking ChatGPT what is the answer and then taking the answer and giving it back to your teacher. A professor told me he can pretty much tell which student is using ChatGPT to produce their essays. And he says nowadays, this is a foreign professor, I'm not sure about Singapore. He says nowadays, almost all students are using ChatGPT. But he can tell the ones who just ask ChatGPT and then cuts and pastes the answer, and the ones who use it effectively to make their essays better. So they are using ChatGPT as a co-intelligence tool to superpower their abilities and to make them write even better essays. Not just to ask a question and cut and paste and produce, you see. So how do we get young people like yourselves and even younger students in schools to embrace the whole range of AI tools? And what we are seeing today is only the beginning. It will just get better and better. And if we can do that, then all of us in Singapore can truly harness the power of AI. Asked about retirement, it is a big concern for us, and that's why I mentioned just now, as part of our strategy to refresh our social compact, we want to provide more assurances for Singaporeans. And one of the key assurances we want to provide is around healthcare and retirement. Healthcare, because as people get older, healthcare needs grow and healthcare costs typically becomes one of their biggest worries. Retirement, to make sure that everyone in Singapore, as they retire, will feel a sense of assurance and security over their retirement years and can grow old in Singapore with peace of mind. So we have already done several things to improve, but we will continue to review our policies to make sure, to see how we can do even better. And hopefully that will give you and your family some assurance that your parents can grow old, retire here, and you can be together here in Singapore as a family unit. They don't have to go overseas and retire overseas. Ask what advice I would give to myself in 2011. Oh, the only thing I would say is, expect the unexpected, as I said just now, and just keep on learning, keep on improving, keep on growing. Because all of us in life, there will be ups and downs, there will be mistakes, there will be setbacks. I look back sometimes when at some of the speeches I make in 2011 and I cringe because I think to myself, gosh, I was really bad. I look back at for example, a dialogue session or a press interview and I think to myself, oh, that was terrible. But that's the whole point, right? We are allowed to make mistakes. We are allowed to fall down. We are allowed to, and sometimes we learn more from these setbacks. We learn a lot more when we are pushed to the limit, when we go beyond our comfort zone, and then we start to realize actually we can be much, much better. So that's the advice I would give to myself, and that's the advice I would give to all of you too.
Thank you, PM. I'm going to start with who's at mic number 3, and then I'll work backwards to number 2 and number 1. Let's take a few questions.
So the question I have is that the public discourse on foreign manpower has become increasingly polarized, and most can accept that we need foreigners, but Singaporeans are also worried that more foreigners will lead to fewer opportunities at the workplace and dilution of Singapore identity. So how can we balance between the benefits and the downfall of a larger foreign workforce and protect the Singaporean interests? And how can we better shape the national identity? Thank you.
Thank you. Foreign manpower and national interest.
I'm curious about the future plans for continued social mobility, especially in light of growing inequality in Singapore, resulting in unequal starting points or social privileges. So, for example, those with resources have access to better networks and can move forward more rapidly, and others might feel like they can't keep up. I would love to hear your thoughts on this societal phenomenon and perhaps future plans to ensure social mobility for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Social inequality and
Thank
social
you.
mobility. And to the gentleman at number 1.
My question is rather straightforward but also potentially complex. So there has been a recent rise in discourse surrounding issues and challenges of mental health. So my question is, as the Prime Minister of Singapore, what do you envision to be Singapore's specific strategies in tackling mental health issues, both in clinical settings as well as in Singaporeans' daily lives?
Thank you. I see a lot of people queuing up. Shall we just take a few more questions? Otherwise, I don't think we can finish everyone within the time limit.
Indeed. Shall we continue with number 1?
Yes.
So you mentioned during your opening address that there are many alternative career paths now, for example, starting up. But it seems that some policies, like the HDB housing loan eligibility, are not updated to support such Singaporeans. For example, I know entrepreneurs that because they're starting out, do not give themselves a salary, and as such, do not qualify for housing loans. And as students, we can ask for deferments of income assessment, but this option is not open to graduates that are starting up. So I would like to ask, what can be done to support young Singaporeans that want to settle down and start families, but also pursue their dreams?
Thank you.
Thank you. Number 2.
Personally, I call both Myanmar and Singapore my home. And with the current issues rising globally as well as within the ASEAN region, my question to you is, how is Singapore planning to strategize its economic policies
such that it balances our relationship with the power countries like US and China, but at the same time maintaining our close ties with the other ASEAN region countries. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the involvement of Singapore's finance influencers such as Satisfy for personal finance, I Just Try La, Fiona Doncher, also known as SG Budget Babe, as well as Vanessa Ho, who is a multi-talented tech personality who was from VJC, which is your alma mater as far as I understand, in driving public engagement and investment in personal finance and fintech ventures can stimulate economic activity and innovation. However, this also raises questions about market stability and the role of influencers in shaping economic narratives. So I'd like to ask, how do you see your government addressing the potential economic impact of Singapore's finance influencers on domestic markets? And what measures are being put in place to ensure that their influence leads to sustainable economic benefits for all segments of the Singapore society at large?
Thank you. You're talking about digital content creators, social media influencers. Got it. Yeah. Okay, let's see.
There is Fern.
All right, let's. Entrepreneurs, thank you for the feedback. I think we will be prepared to be flexible. It's very hard to do it across the board, but I think in cases where there is a entrepreneur, and obviously the entrepreneur may not have a good salary, but has a very promising venture, and therefore potentially has a ability to pay the loan, then I think HDB can be persuaded to be more flexible. But it will have to be case by case. And the last thing HDB wants to do is to provide a loan, and then the entrepreneur finds that the business is not successful, the startup is not successful, and they end up saddled with a very heavy debt. Right? But your point is well taken, because we do want many more young people like yourselves to settle down quickly. Ask about foreign manpower. How do we find the balance? We have to be an open economy because of the points I raised just now. When companies invest here, they will want to recruit from all over the world in order to service their Singapore operations. Remember, when companies set up operations here, it's not for the Singapore market. Our market is so small. They are not interested in our market. They are setting up regional or even global operations here. So when they do that, obviously, they will want to have access to regional and global talent. Otherwise, if you tell them you can only hire Singaporeans, they will say, well, thank you, but I would rather set up my operation somewhere else. So we have to stay open, because this is the only way to attract investments and create jobs for Singaporeans. How do we find a balance? We do it by controlling the inflow of foreigners. It's not a free-for-all. We don't ever want to be overwhelmed. So we control with a system of levies, quotas, all sorts of safeguards. And soon we will also be putting in place a new legislation on workplace fairness to prohibit discrimination, which includes discriminations by race, by nationality, by age. So hopefully all that will provide for a fairer and more competitive workplace environment. People can do well according to their own merits. But at the same time, while we control the flow, while we ensure fairness at the workplace, at the same time, we are doing even more to invest in Singaporeans. So in fact, we are giving Singaporeans a leg up. We are giving you the extra advantage by investing in your skills, by investing in training programs for you, investing in opportunities for you to work overseas. Take the example of finance. We are developing, or we have developed over the years, a Singaporean Leaders in Finance network. We identify promising young Singaporeans in finance. We give them opportunities. We work with their employers. It can be Citibank, it can be a local bank, it can be a global bank, whatever it is. We provide through their employers opportunities for them to get training, to go overseas. We then, over the years, developed this network of Singaporean leaders in finance. And over time, some of them have emerged to become CEOs in their own rights. or at least leading a division within their company. Some CEOs overseas, because a global bank will have a branch in Indonesia, in Thailand, and they may very well lead the overseas branch. So it has worked in giving more opportunities for young Singaporeans. And I think that's how we can find the right balance between foreign professionals as well as investing in Singaporeans. The question on mental health, we are taking this very seriously. We've put together a task force. We now have a national mental health and well-being strategy. It's actually, we put out a lot of materials online. So I would encourage, if you have not read it, access the website on MOH website. We had a full debate on this in Parliament recently, where we also set out government's thinking and how we would go about investing more in mental health capabilities, not just at the clinical level, which is at IMH and hospitals where clinical resources and capabilities are needed, but also in the community. Because a lot of the mental health issues that come up and are surfaced are not necessarily clinical, and they do not need to be treated at the specialist level. It's like when you fall sick, when you feel unwell, the first thing you do is not to go to a specialist and ask the specialist, please treat me. The first thing you do is look at your symptoms. Maybe you just go to the pharmacy to get some medication. Maybe you go to a GP and the GP will treat you. So we need different levels of care for mental health similarly. Some of it can be done by counselors in schools. Some of it can be done within the community. Some of it can even be done by the GPs. And then, of course, for the serious cases, they will have to be done by specialist doctors. And we are reinforcing and putting in more resources across all of these levels. That's the essence of our strategy. Mobility, ask about social mobility. It's also an important priority for us. First of all, inequality, we are tackling it, and we are making progress. If you look at income inequality in Singapore, certainly as measured by the Gini coefficient is coming down, which means we are becoming more equal, not less equal, becoming more equal as far as income is concerned, which is a good thing. And we will continue to move in that direction. But inequality is not the same as mobility. Mobility is referring to opportunities for those who are in the more disadvantaged groups to move up. And we are also doing more there, including investing in preschool, making sure children, even from low-income families, have a good start in life. We have Kids Start for them. We have more learning support programs for them in schools. So we are going out of the way to provide extra resources to level the playing field and to provide as much support as possible for young people, starting at a very early age in preschool. And we will continue to lean in that direction to ensure that social mobility in Singapore remains alive and well. Financial influencers. There are digital content creators out there. We all know who they are. I mean, they are there. They talk and provide commentary on a whole range of issues, and some of them may very well do so in finance. I don't think they create systematic risk for our financial sector. What they may do is I don't know if they go and provide stock tips, maybe. They may provide advice on what to buy, what products to buy. So if some of this goes beyond regulatory, what's prudent and what they should be able to do, because you need to be a financial advisor to provide such advice, then we'll have to look at this. But even if we regulate in Singapore, the reality is it's an open world, it's an open internet. You can get all sorts of advice on the internet. And we can't stop people from accessing these things online. We can't have a great wall. We can't block these things. For example, we've said over and over and over again, please do not buy crypto. But I don't know how many of you here do. And so again, it comes down to, at the end of the day, buyer beware, and we have to raise consumer education. We have to remind people of what they should do as investors. And if for most of us, if you're not a sophisticated investor, if you don't understand the markets, better to be prudent, to be disciplined, to be responsible, and don't go and listen to these advice thinking that you can put some money and quickly get a quick win. It never happens. There is no free lunch. If you know of any advice for the person who gave the comment, if you think that there are any particular influencers who have crossed the line, and you think that they are people we should be sort of perhaps have a chat with and remind them not to go too far, then let us know. We will have a friendly conversation with them. Finally, the question on strategic economic priorities, which is a very important question. Our basic foreign policy position is not to choose sides. I think you know that. We are not choosing US or China. If anything, we are just pro-Singapore, which means we just want to be consistent and credible in our foreign policy. We will do what is necessary to stand up for Singapore's interests. From time to time, it may mean taking a decision that seems to be closer to the US, but it doesn't mean we are pro-US. Or from time to time, it may mean taking a decision that may be similar to China, but again, it doesn't mean that we are pro-China. We are simply conducting ourselves in a way that advances Singapore's interests. So we have to be clear what our interests are, and then to get Singaporeans to support that, and to act in a way that's consistent, credible, and principled. And the more we do so, I think the more countries around us will know what Singapore stands for, and this will make us a more trusted partner for everyone. And if we can continue to operate with all the countries, US, China, Southeast Asia, India, Southeast Asia, then I think that puts us in the sweet spot. Singapore can be a neutral platform. Companies from all over the world can be here, and we can continue to make a good living for ourselves.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I'm conscious that Prime Minister's had a day in Parliament, a long day in Parliament, and he came straight from there. And I want to invite some of you, the many of you who are waiting at the mics, for some of you to volunteer to return to your seats, because I don't think we're going to be able to work through all of you. Perhaps if we've actually exceeded the time, but if PM you're agreeable, we go on for a little bit
yes,
more.
we can.
Yeah.
I mean, if your questions have been answered in some way or form, maybe we can give others a chance.
Yeah. So if you're thinking about questions around AI, which has been talked about quite a bit, retirement, foreign manpower, entrepreneurs, maybe we'll give the time to other topics. Shall we go to number one? We'll take maybe next 5 or 6 questions. Number one.
Okay, so I have known some students from ASEAN countries, including Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, who are eager to obtain scholarships to study in Singapore due to its reputation for having high standards of living and strong safety record. These scholars contribute significantly to Singapore by providing talent, knowledge, and skills. Former Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong emphasized in his National Day rally speech in 2022, and I quote, "Singapore must build a world-class talent pool because this is an age where talent makes all the difference to the nation's success. Top talent can also design and conduct training programs that enhance the skills of local employees, improving our job outcomes of these people." Apart from the ASEAN scholarships, what other scholarships focus on research in the mathematical sciences field, the science and technology, will the government introduce to attract scholars with extensive knowledge and innovative ideas to Singapore and diversify the top talent in this nation?
I hope you don't mind if I ask a bit tough question. I just wanted to ask, regardless of political affiliation, I was wondering, why is it permissible that most members of parliament are able to take a second job I was just wondering, shouldn't the responsibility of like a full-time job be looking after its constituents and issues pertaining to the nation's interest as a whole full-time? And secondly, do you think it would be a conflict of interest if there's like similar to the US where like senators would push their like their backers or like their corporate interests over the state's interests?
So during your budget speech earlier this year, you mentioned that Singapore is not ruling out nuclear power. So I believe that to wean Singapore off like fossil fuels and eventually achieve net zero, nuclear energy could be one of the solutions. So however, given that the safety of like nuclear reactors is a security concern, do you believe that Singapore will be proceeding with nuclear power in the future?
Good evening, Prime Minister Wong and Professor Liliko Tong. PM, you spoke about megatrends and areas in which us youths can explore for our interests and career options. You also spoke about uplifting low-wage workers. Most of such low-paying jobs are in sectors such as sanitation, security, and construction, and are heavily dependent on older workers and foreign workers. Is relying on such an aging population and foreign workers a sustainable solution, or will we eventually strategize to tackle the lack of interest amongst youth?
Thank you. Number 2, please.
So my question to you is that, the election is coming in about a year's time. So in view of our increasing contestation of our political arena under your premiership, so how will your government strategize and communicate with Singaporeans to implement unpopular but necessary economic policies, such as potentially raising the GST again in the 2030s?
Oh, okay.
2030s, potentially, yes, despite an increase in support for more opposition voices among younger Singaporeans. Yes.
Thank you.
Has clarity about when the elections are going to be and when the GST is going up again. You must recruit him. Number 3, please.
A very good evening to everyone. Okay, so before I ask my question, let me extend my congratulations to you on your appointment as Prime Minister.
Thank you.
So my question would be, are there any significant policy areas or initiatives that contributes to Singapore's future that you personally feel they are underappreciated and misunderstood by the public? For instance, with regards to climate change, mental health, or foreign relations?
Underappreciated by Singaporeans.
Or misunderstood by
Okay,
Singaporeans.
sure.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. Scholarships, we will continue to see what makes sense because we do want to attract talent, but we want to attract talent the right way. It's not about the numbers, and it's not just about the quality of the person, but we also want to make sure that the individual embraces our values and our way of life, and then adapts to Singapore's norms. And hopefully, they will be able to integrate here, sink roots here, and they will add to our Singapore population down the road because they will want to fight for Singapore, defend Singapore as well. So that's really our talent strategy. It's not just about numbers. It's really about adding to Singapore and making sure that we continue to have the right people with the right values and mindsets who will always have Singapore's interest at heart. On MPs, why do we allow MPs to have another full-time job? It's really a pragmatic arrangement. I mean, if you think about it, office holders, ministers also have a full-time job. My full-time job is not to be a full-time MP. My full-time job is to be the Prime Minister. That's my full-time job, in a way, governing. Then, of course, I have my MP duties to do. So the ministers all do that. They have a full-time job governing, but they have their MP's duties. And in the same way, just to be pragmatic about it, we recognize that some people have full-time commitments, have other private sector commitments, not in the public sector. They have private sector commitments. We let them do it. But we fully expect them to discharge their MP duties well. And if they fail to do so, well, there will be a consequence. Either as a party, we will find that they are not doing enough, and therefore we may not renew them, or voters will decide, and voters will know if their MP is working hard or not, and voters can decide. Conflicts of interest can be taken care of, and we have a process you can declare, and we have not had a problem. In fact, we are very vigilant about making sure no such conflicts ever happen in Singapore, because we don't want to end up with a society where there is money politics. We want to keep our system clean, and we want to make sure that whoever represents Singaporeans as members of parliament, regardless of party, doesn't matter which party, across the board, we want to make sure that we have a political system that is clean and has integrity. Once we lose that, once money politics seeps in, once vested interest seeps in, we will be in deep, deep trouble. So we will always be vigilant in making sure our system remains clean. Asked about nuclear power, we haven't decided. We think it's something we have to keep options open, only because the technology for nuclear is evolving. It's becoming smaller, it's becoming safer, and down the road we may very well find that there will be an option that enables it to happen in Singapore. We don't know if this is possible yet. So all we are doing now is to say we don't rule it out. In fact, we have to do more to understand nuclear technologies, because our capabilities are very weak. So we are leveling up our capabilities. We are touching base with countries with such capabilities so that we can understand better and we can start building up our capabilities. So that's where we are. We are still in very early stages. Let's see. Asked about low-wage workers, whether it's sustainable to just rely on the elderly and foreign workers. It certainly isn't. So we want to, what we would like to do is to uplift lower-wage jobs. So whether you're talking about cleaners, security, landscape, technicians, we have progressive wages where we are trying to uplift their wages in line with skills and productivity improvements. And it's not just the starting salary, but with training, somebody coming in can start as a technician, but later on you can develop, you can grow, you may be able to be a supervisor, you may be able to do more, and you can be, running a department. So there are potentially good career options in these careers, but we have to work at improving the skills and raising the wages, which is what we are doing. Even after doing all that, I don't think in some of these areas we can have 100% Singaporeans working. For example, construction. I don't think we have to be realistic. So there will still be a lot of manual work that migrant workers will help us do, and we appreciate them for it. But within the construction sector, you can imagine someone working as a supervisor, someone working as a project manager, someone doing what they call the BIM modeling. That means you do the modeling for the building in the virtual world. These are good jobs that Singaporeans can do. And then we can work together as a team. So that's what we are trying to do for these industries. What else?
Communication of unpopular but necessary.
How do we communicate unpopular but still policies that will be important and necessary for Singapore to move forward, like what we had done with GST recently? I think we will do it as certainly as far as the ruling party is concerned. If we have the mandate in the next election and we continue to have the mandate from the people to govern Singapore, then we will continue with the same approach, which is to reject populism, but to do the right things that are in the best interests of Singapore and Singaporeans. Some of these things will be popular, so that's good, right? The popular things everyone will cheer. If I provide another round of CDC vouchers, everyone will be very happy. And set that aside, but but there will also be policies that are necessary but not so popular. Because whatever the government does, we have to make sure our budget is balanced. We have to make sure that we pay for the measures that we introduce, and we have to make sure that we keep moving Singapore forward in the right path. And if these are difficult measures, but still important to do, we will explain to Singaporeans why they are necessary, and we will try our best to persuade Singaporeans to understand and to support these policies. We won't get 100% support. We may not even get 75% support, but if we can get the majority of Singaporeans to understand, then hopefully we will still be able to implement some of these difficult but necessary policies. This is not to say that I agree with him that GST is coming. Please don't misunderstand. That's his speculation.
This is how rumors start. Let's kill that right now. I am conscious that
one more, right?
Misunderstood, being misunderstood by Singaporeans.
That's right. Whether there are any significant policy areas that are misunderstood. There are many things that are misunderstood, but I would say in Singapore, let's be grateful for many of the fundamentals we have that if you're a young person growing up elsewhere in the region or anywhere else in the world, you may not have the same basic fundamentals. A good education is one. Housing, the fact that all of us enjoy HDB housing, it's another. Public transport, the quality of our public transport system. So you can go through all of these things that we sometimes take for granted in Singapore because it's, it's here, it's like, well, to be expected. But in fact, in many other places, these things don't work so well. Even these supposed basics are not available. So life is not always greener on the other side. And if you travel more, if you go out more to the region, experience it, I think we start to realize Singapore is not perfect by any means, but there is a lot to be grateful for, and there's a lot we should count our blessings for here in Singapore. But we can make it better, and we need all of you to keep on making it better.
Indeed. I'm afraid I will have to disappoint so many of you who are still at the microphones, but we've really run way out of time, and I apologize.
Why don't we just do one last round?
Okay, one more round.
And then
a round of applause for the PM.
But you don't have to stand up anymore. I think we can only take one more round, which means 6, right?
Yeah.
2-2.
Yeah.
2-2-2.
Okay, just the final round. Mic 1, please.
I have a question. Is that based on my observation of the Singapore tech industry, I noticed that most of the big tech companies in Singapore are primarily focused on the sales operations, while the product development and software development are based offshore, like India or US. So given this trend, how can Singapore maintain our competitive advantage in the tech industry? And what can us soon-to-be graduates here support your vision of Singapore's tech industry? Thank you.
As you know, there is a rapid developing industry of AI and technology, but along with that is a threat of scams. As Mr. Warren Buffett has mentioned, that the biggest AI market could be scam profits, and the awareness that is taught among us can no longer help victims identify whether what is true or a scam. How do you think we can spread new awareness or find a way to defend people from that?
At the mic number 3, please.
I got to know a friend who is an entrepreneur, and my question is, how can a sole proprietor sustain a business started with minimal risk in a low footfall traffic location, where purchasing stocks at lower costs is challenging and often results in buying at market prices?
Can you elaborate a little? What does your friend do?
Sorry, my friend is an entrepreneur.
And he's buying stuff and reselling the stuff.
Yes, due to the rising costs, he is unable to buy a lot of ingredients at
Okay.
the market.
Not e-commerce, right?
Yes, not e-commerce.
Physical retail. Got it.
Perhaps we could go to the person behind you, number 3.
I think my question is quite straightforward. It's only with regards to your speech. So you mentioned that we should stop comparing and we should start looking within. And I think that it's not a problem with most of us or younger people. It's not a problem. We can do that. But how can we do that in a system where they constantly compare us against each other? They are doing this in the workplace. Before entering uni, I was in the public service for almost 6 years. And in the public service, you are constantly being compared against each other to get your grades, to get your promotion, etc. It also starts from your education as well when you're younger. And I was born in 1996. It was quite competitive then. You have aggregate, you have streaming, you have the best schools, the worst schools. And I'm glad these are being undone on the education level. But will there be more changes in the workplace, or I don't know, what would be your plan to undo this system? Because it's not a problem to most of us. We can undo that, but will the system undo that with us?
Thank you.
Okay, we'll come back to mic number 2.
Singapore today is very different from what it was 20 years ago, back in 1994, with the advent of the internet. Now with ChatGPT, generative AI, Singapore will be even more different 20 years from now. In 2044, the rate of change in the next 20 years will likely outpace and eclipse that of the past 20 years. And while the benefits of AI cannot be underestimated, it is a double-edged sword, right? Because traditional industries will be disrupted, job securities may be even less common as employers look to become more cost-efficient and automated. The quantum of new jobs replacing the old may not be sufficient, and as a result, traditional education may also get disrupted too to adjust to the new demands. My question is, with this context in mind, how would you advise the youth of today how to manage this evolving landscape to remain relevant and creative and possibly create their own opportunities via self-employment or the like? How would Singapore manage this new reality as so that our society remains equitable, so that the wealth does not become too concentrated on a few successful and lucky businessmen and to become more inclusive? And especially for the youth of today who may not have the chance to pursue traditional education, who come from non-traditional backgrounds, non-traditional career paths, and may have non-traditional qualifications. What would you say to these people?
Well done. Just one last question at mic number 1.
So, Mr. Wong, you have a great hairstyle, but I think the biggest risk to your hairstyle is probably Singapore's declining birth rate, am I right? So, I would like to know your opinion. On using minimum
Not
basic...
the hairstyle, it's the hair.
Yeah. I would like to know your opinion on using the minimum basic income policy, where you give free cash to mothers and children to cover their cost of living, to encourage women to have children, and they can still go to work and they have their minimum baseline covered. What do you think about it?
Could I ask one last question, please? Please. My question is related to the arts industry in Singapore. So Singapore is a regional financial powerhouse, but has traditionally neglected the arts and alternative investments subsector of the financial services industry, where currently Hong Kong is the APAC headquarters. How is the government planning to take charge of the arts and alternative investments scene in Singapore now that Hong Kong is no longer ideal due to geopolitical turbulence? To the best of my knowledge, the most prominent homegrown auction house in Singapore is started and owned by an expat, and Sotheby's and Christie's, they don't even hire NTU or NUS students as interns. Yeah, that's my question.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Right. Okay, let's go through. Let's see how we should do it. Fintech, software development, and whether or not we are losing out on the good jobs because the sales are here, but the software development is done elsewhere. It is a concern, I acknowledge. The fundamental issue we face is we just don't have enough critical mass of good software developers. It's in short supply. And that's why we are trying to train more. That's why we are trying to bring in more. And hopefully with a critical mass of good software developers like yourselves, we can step by step get more companies to do more of their software development work out of Singapore and not just the sales and servicing part of it. We do want to get the critical part of the value to be done and anchored here in Singapore. So we are mindful of this. Scams, it's a concern. We've been fighting this. We've been going all out to tackle scams. The banks have been doing it. MAS have been doing it. The police. It's a whole of government effort. Things have gotten better. Our safeguards, our protocols have improved across the board. But it is still, at the end of the day, very hard to bring it down to zero. And so it's because the scams can be in all forms. It can be a love scam, it can be an investment scam, it can be an impersonation scam, somebody pretending to be the police, and then a vulnerable senior gets worried and then gives their details to the person thinking that this is a legitimate police officer. So it's, and the scammers are always creative and coming up with new methods. Each time we find one method, we tell everyone, please don't do this, and then another new method comes up. So it's a cat and mouse, but we will not stop trying. AI will make it worse, we recognize this, but we will have to keep on upping our defenses, strengthening our safeguards and defenses, and ultimately, this is about public education, and it has to start from young, right? I'll give Piyush a plug, right? The chairman of SMU, Piyush, is here. We had a chat about this recently at MAS, and he was telling us that this is like traffic safety rules. It's like young people learning about traffic safety for the first time, right? You know, you have to learn what it means to walk safely, to navigate your way around in a busy road. And we do this from the very young age. And so over time, young people, you are safe. Even though you're navigating a very busy road, you know what to do, you know what the rules are. You don't just jaywalk and you don't just put yourself at risk. So from a very young age, we do need to put in place a good system of public education. Let everyone know, don't give your credentials to a stranger. Never mind who that person is. Never, ever give your credentials away. So basic information like this, basic rules like this, we just have to keep on reminding people over and over and over again, starting young, and then we have to take special care of our seniors who are very vulnerable. And we are looking at additional measures and safeguards that we can do to take care for this particular group. And then over time, hopefully we can continue to bring down the rates of scams in Singapore. Ask about retail. The retail sector is hard because if your retail business is simply to buy something from overseas and resell it here, it is not easy to do. In order to make money, you have to account for your rental cost, your labor cost, so you have a margin added. And nowadays with e-commerce, I'm sure all of you are buying stuff online. If that same stuff is available overseas, then you would just buy overseas and it probably comes in cheaper and delivered to your home. So the retail business has to transform. It cannot simply be about importing and selling. You have to think about what's the value add that you are providing to your customers. What's the additional advantage, the customer experience you are providing. And that calls for entrepreneurship. Some will succeed, some may not. That's the nature of business. And the ones that may not succeed, well, they have to potentially, eventually fold, relinquish their business, but then new ideas, new creativity, new entrepreneurs will come in and will make the retail scene more vibrant. So we know it's a difficult sector, but we do need new entrepreneurs to inject new ideas and creativity and innovation for the retail sector. Let's see. I will take question last. Asked about self-employment and the non-traditional careers, whether there will be more support for people who venture in these paths. Certainly, we want to encourage young people like yourselves to embrace different paths. And some of you may have pursued different educational tracks. Some of you may then go on to pursue less conventional career pathways. But as I said just now, we want to put in place a stronger safety net in Singapore so that even if you fail, whatever pathway you take, you will have the ability to bounce back from the setback. That's what we are trying to do. And so we are reviewing our schemes, whether through Skills Future, through training, whether through unemployment support. We are reviewing all of these policies to make sure that we have a stronger safety net in Singapore, precisely to provide assurance for all of you that you can have the courage, have the assurance to pursue these different pathways. And there will be setbacks, as I said, from time to time, but always have the assurance that the basics in life will be taken care of, that you can recover from your setbacks, bounce back stronger, and try again. And that's the spirit that we hope you will embrace. Basic income policy, I suppose you mean the universal income, right? This is an idea that has come up where people talk about, rather than give all these targeted subsidies, means tested and all that, take away all that complication and give everyone a simple basic income, whatever amount, and everyone gets the same amount. The difficulty with that is, number one, a lot of people like to talk about the basic income. They don't talk about the first part, which is actually we are talking about taking away all today's subsidies and converting it into a uniform flat rate basic income across the board. But actually that is quite regressive, isn't it? Because if I do that, even the millionaire in Singapore gets a basic income. Even the rich gets a basic income. That's what this policy means. Everyone gets the same basic income. And I think it's hard to justify from my point of view why we need to give everyone, especially those who have benefited, the same rate. I would prefer, if resources are plentiful, perhaps that is neatest. It's very simple to administer. But given a situation where resources are tight, I would prefer to target my limited resources to those who are in need, which means providing to those who are more disadvantaged, lower incomes, those who are more vulnerable. Of course, identifying who these are is not easy. There will be debates on what the criteria is, and we can discuss these criteria, but I think that targeted approach will work better for us in bringing about a fairer and more equal society. Arts, we are investing more in the arts. In fact, in this budget this year, we have provided more support for the arts, including support for matching grants, support for artists, support for the art master plan. So we will do more on the art side. Arts education is one thing which we are doing, which we are setting up a new University of the Arts in Singapore with NAFA and LaSalle together. So that's already a big move, and we will continue to invest in the arts. You compared with Hong Kong. Well, Hong Kong has an arts industry. It's not just artists, it's an arts industry. You have people buying art pieces. You have auction houses selling to very rich individuals who will be happy to put money into art and buy very expensive art pieces. It's not, I don't think we can ever match that scale, because if you talk about Chinese wealth, there's a lot of wealth out there from China and then going into Hong Kong. And they will always be looking at ways to diversify their wealth and to invest in non-traditional assets like art. So it's hard for us to match that kind of scale. That's arts industry. But as far as arts is concerned, culture, heritage, these are things we are focused on, and we do want to invest in them. And we are, in fact, as a government, doing more in these areas. Finally, talking about how can we get the system to stop comparing, because you will not have that problem, but the system is forcing you to compare. I don't have an easy answer, to be honest, because the challenge will always be there. In a competitive economy, companies, organizations will have to look at promoting certain individuals. All organizations operate on the basis of having a command structure. You need a leader. Who should be the leader of that organization? Even a department head, a division head. Private sector operates like that. Everyone operates like that. It's very hard to operate on the basis that you don't have leadership responsibilities. We all somehow try and work together. But you need some structure in any society, in any organization. And when you have a structure, then you need people to think about who might step forward to be the leader and who might step forward to take on larger responsibilities. So inevitably, when that thing happens, you will create some of the pressures. But I think what we can do in Singapore is to encourage and promote a culture of a more egalitarian culture, where we are all equals. We may have different roles. Not everyone can be the CEO. Not everyone can be the department head or the division head. But everyone should feel respected. Everyone should be treated equally. There's no need to have bow and scrape before your superiors. We are all equals. We can talk as equals. We can talk informally. And that's the kind of egalitarian ethos we want to have in Singapore. And we must always have. And if we do that well in Singapore, then hopefully you don't feel so pressurized. You don't feel like you're always comparing with one another. Yes, you may not get the promotion you sought for. Someone else may have gotten it, but you wish your colleague well. You may not get your desired role, but you focus on the work that you do. You do your work well, recognizing that eventually your talents will be recognized. And so focus, again, as I said, go back to focus on your strengths and do your work well. Eventually, there will be possibilities for you to flourish. I say that from personal experience too. You know, when I started work in 1997, I joined the civil service. Back then, the civil service was not as enlightened as it is today. And they had different tracks of progression. And there were fast track, and there were normal track. I was not on the fast track. And my peers coming back from university and joining the civil service, some were on the fast track, and they were promoted faster than me. And then some of my peers who didn't join the civil service, who joined the private sector, especially when they joined finance, because in the 90s, finance took off, so many of my peers joined finance. Finance was paying well, and they were all earning more than me. So I understand fully the pressures, because then you feel like, oh, this is not fair. Why is this happening? Why are some people benefiting more than others? And it's normal to compare. And because of those pressures, I did think of leaving the civil service at one stage. But over time, I met with mentors who encouraged me to focus on my work, think about the impact of the work I do in the public service. And when I reflected on it, they gave me opportunities to do more policy work. And I felt that the work was meaningful, so I stayed on. And I eventually continued on in the public service for 15 years before entering politics. And I found that meaningful, fulfilling, and I found it to be a calling. And I didn't feel the need after that to compare with others, because once you center and focus on what you think is meaningful and fulfilling, I think the comparisons become less important. And what's more important is that you feel like you've done your best. You feel like whatever you're contributing to is meaningful and fulfilling. And I hope all of you can find that. Right? The pressures will exist. I acknowledge that. And it's impossible to to remove it entirely. But recognize, try to find meaning, purpose in what you do. Continue to excel, continue to develop, continue to grow. And hopefully with that attitude and mindset, you will feel less of a pressure to compare with others. You will feel less of a pressure in society at large, and we can all flourish and thrive in our own ways. That's the Singapore I hope we can all achieve together.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I think you will agree with me that the PM has covered a breadth of topics. He began with his speech talking about the major sweeping changes that we are all confronting globally, whether it's technological change or climate change or geopolitics. And he exhorted us to think about refreshing our social compact, redefining what success means, and to redouble our efforts to do our part in building a better and more inclusive society. And those words he left with us, and we went very quickly into a very lively round of questions, and for that you really deserve kudos as an audience for having been so participatory. You've covered a range of topics from the economic, which I think predominated, to the social and the political and the personal. And in the economic sphere, I think we talked about the labor force, we talked about talent attraction, scholarships, we talked about talent retention, we talked about how to, in the face of foreign talent and foreign manpower, how do we do something for Singaporeans? And Prime Minister responded with the importance of providing our Singaporeans through education and skills future with the appropriate skills, and also offering the opportunities to work regionally, to expose yourselves and to develop yourselves. I was very taken by the fact that you weren't just thinking about yourselves, you were also thinking about the lower wage workers, you were thinking about non-traditional work, you were thinking about entrepreneurs, so that diversity that makes up an economy, those are the different dimensions that you all talked about, which I think was fantastic. I'm particularly delighted that Prime Minister talked about how it is skills and not industry silos that matter, and that when we think about the skills that are needed, think about the mega trends, and here he talked about the digital, sustainability, and Asia. But even while they provide opportunities, they are challenges. There are challenges, the scams that you asked questions about, treacherous ones, and how do we protect ourselves and how do we protect our elders, was something that Prime Minister touched on as well. On the social front, I think you covered questions again that belie concern for others in society. So while you are in a sense perhaps the more successful in society, being in IHLs and so forth, you were also concerned about social inequality and social mobility and asked questions about how those issues might be addressed. You were concerned about mental health issues and mental wellness, and I think that is a very important topic that the government has paid quite a lot of attention to. You were concerned about keeping society together, community together, families together as retirement costs go up, and how to address that as well, and Prime Minister gave his take on that. And I think from a societal perspective, to the last question that the PM addressed, you're very much concerned about societal pressures and peer pressures, and he's encouraged us to think about what we're good at, who we are, to find meaning and purpose, and so forth. And so this brings us right back to one of the earliest questions about what the 2011 Lawrence Wong would advise himself today. And I think Prime Minister has been very consistent in his response about learning from setbacks, about expecting the unexpected, and finding meaning in what you do, and pursuing that with passion and meaning. So on that personal note of what he's shared about his own journey, I invite you to join me in thanking the Prime Minister for a very invigorating dialogue. Thank you.